Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 22 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And today we're going to talk with Sam Cummings about his memories of growing up in Kane during an era where there wasn't the advanced technology that we have today. He shares what it was like in his neighborhood, some stories about hunting with his family, and just kind of a different time that has gone by. So enjoy these memories, and please, if you have your stories of your own and memories of your own about this time period, share in the comments below. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around. We're going to go outside here. Hopefully I don't get stuck in the door.
Yeah.
Hey Sam.
Hi Kate.
Thanks so much for doing this today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about your childhood memories, really that time period, that era. When were you born? What year?
68.
Okay, and where did you grow up?
Right here, actually. We're upstairs of the funeral home where I live now, and my parents' house is right next door, and I grew up there my entire life.
So like corner of Dawson
Corner of
and
Greaves and Dawson. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was it like as a kid growing up here in this neighborhood?
It was nice, and I'm not sure that the neighborhoods aren't the same now, but back then, I mean, you really had neighborhoods, and all the kids came out and played in your neighborhood. There weren't video games and things like that, so there was many kids, anywhere from 3 years younger than me to 3 years older than me, and you would be out, and there was a basketball hoop over in the Lutheran Church parking lot, some yards in the area behind the Lutheran Church and behind what's DeLong's house now, where we had baseball games and football games, and it was a very tight-knit neighborhood.
Yeah, and so what would like a typical summer day look like for you?
Well, on a summer day, you would, you'd call your friends. There was no cell phone, so you would call them, and the phone would ring in their living room, because that was the only phone in the house, and their mother or father, or whoever answered the phone, would get them. Or if you weren't calling them, you'd go knock on their door. I mean, that was the only way you would know if they were home or not. You had to go out and actually physically do it. And then you would go out and play. And of course, we played in the neighborhood a lot, but I don't know if it was a safer time back then or not, or we just had less worries, but it wouldn't matter if I was playing in a neighborhood. I could be down at Centelli Field playing. I could be in the woods behind the middle school now playing. You just had to make it home by dinner time.
Yeah.
And it was like that for most people. Your parents didn't necessarily know where you were all day. You had asked me before, like, how would your parents get a hold of you? Well, if you're in the neighborhood, I mean, my parents would go out on the back porch and just yell as loud as they could. And everybody's parents did it. And I had mentioned that in the neighborhood, like Ingrid Cartwright, her family lived down here, and across the street, her uncle and their family lived, and that was Tom and Sue Anderson, and they had a big dinner bell in their backyard, and when they needed their kids home, they would just go out and just ring the dinner bell, and you could hear it for 3 blocks, and that means your kids had to go home.
So then all the kids probably responded to that.
Oh, everybody would hear it, and they would know. And if if you were playing 2 blocks away and somebody was 1 block away and they heard your mom screaming for you, they'd come tell you your mom wants you. And that's kind of how it was back then. Everybody kind of had their thing, and there was different neighborhoods. The street right beside the funeral home is Dawson. Excuse me. The next street's Welsh, and Welsh was the cutoff for Clay Street. Mm-hmm. So anybody that lived on the other side of Welsh went to Clay Street schools, and this side all went to Chestnut. And after elementary school, it wasn't a big deal. We kind of all got integrated into the middle school system. But up to that point, that was a very tight-knit neighborhood too, and they got a lot of Clay Street pride. They loved Clay Street. And
yeah, I think Tom's going to talk about Clay Street later.
Yeah, Tom, my business partner, went to Clay Street, and we've been great friends since, middle school. But prior to that, he went to a different school. We didn't really even see each other. And then you had the south side down on the other side of the railroad tracks, down kind of like Hemlock, or that area was like the south side group, and there was a bunch of people that played in that neighborhood, and then you had all the people in the west side, mm-hmm. which was kind of a long, very long neighborhood, but they all kind of got together over there.
And then you guys all met up at middle school and then went through high school together.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And as you had mentioned earlier about the difference in the technologies, and like I said, you called the house, you didn't text, you couldn't do that. And I don't know if it made us slightly more mature. Not saying smarter than kids are nowadays, but you had to learn how to fend for yourself a lot better. And I always tell the story about, we had the funeral home, and when I could drive, if there was a reason, I'd have to go and pick a body up. And I would do that for my dad, and I can remember going all the way to Virginia when I was high school age, 16, 17 years old. No GPS, no cell phone. Everything was written on a piece of paper. If you got lost, it was up to you. You got to find your way. You stop at a gas station, figure it out, and get back. And it's like I talk to kids nowadays, and like they say, "Oh, I got lost." I'm like, "How could you possibly get lost? Your cell phone tells you every turn you got to make until you get there." But yeah, it was a little bit different back then.
Yeah.
But I like the generation, that era, because I'm still old enough, or I am old enough to remember when Kane was very much still thriving. I mean, I think people maybe 5 or 6 years older than me might remember a little bit better, but when I grew up, there was still 3 men's stores uptown, there was 3 women's stores uptown, 3 shoe stores uptown. Everything you needed was here. It was local. There was still a lot of the corner grocery stores were still around. There was more before my generation, but when I grew up, we still had Vincey's down the street here, who probably lasted longer than anybody. And you had Ethel's down on Welsh Street, down the Welsh and Haynes or Welsh and Baird. You had Bloomquist Market up on Biddle Street. You had Austin's, which is in Denny Harris's building. And they were all kind of like dry goods stores. They had penny candy, bread. Vincey had some food on the shelf. I don't know how long it had been there, but he had some things like that. And you always got your Sunday paper from Vince. And, I thought about this morning, and we'd be playing basketball, and you get a break, and you'd run down. And I can remember buying Blue Boy Pop, grape or orange Blue Boy Pop for 35 cents a can. And I was thinking to myself how I would never be sweaty and hot now and go grab a sugary can of pop, but there was no bottled water back then. It wasn't even thought of. And I can remember when bottled water came out thinking, who in the hell will ever buy bottled water when you can get it for free? And look where that went. But we would go down, get our penny candy, do those kind of things. After church, we'd always stop by. Vincey would have the newspapers with the regular customers that he would bill, and their name would be on it. You'd pick up your paper there, maybe get a loaf of bread. He was very active in the fire department, and when I first came back, he was very active with the newspapers also. And we would kind of call obituaries in through him because, now we email obituaries. Back then, it was all done over the phone where you had to read everything and spell everything. That was before we didn't have fax machines. We had a computer, which people would laugh at if they saw now. It was all a DOS system. There was no Windows. But it was a nice generation and a nice era. And because of that time frame I grew up in, I remember Kane like that, and I lived through the demise, which I don't say the demise of Kane. I say the demise of small town America, because all these small towns suffered in the same way. It was when the Walmarts and the big box stores were opening up, and it killed the little businesses, and a lot of the little ones here tried to hang on, and some of them did. I mean, God bless Judy Zelina. She's been here, forever and made it through. Yeah. So it's not easy anymore in a small town. But I'm also here now for what I consider, the revitalization of the town, where a lot of new things have opened up, and there's almost a more of a town pride. You see the buildings are getting fixed up. You've seen some of the dilapidated buildings taken down. It's helped that even at the state, we've redone all the Main Street, and the streets are very nice. But it's kind of coming the other direction, which I haven't seen, since high school. I mean, It's been 30 years since I've seen the town kind of taking this turn.
That's really neat that you got to experience it when it was thriving. Then you were here for when it was kind of going through a harder economic time, and now you're still here to see the comeback.
See it come back.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm here for quite a bit longer, too.
And you're part of the comeback, too. Yeah, you will be. But you're part of the comeback, too, Sam. You guys are doing a great job.
A little bit with the distillery. It was nice. In those businesses like that, and Log Yard, and Twisted Vine, and Flickerwood, and Table 105, they were great for the town. And we thought about this when we opened up, and the town's been very good to us. We get a lot of support from the town, but we also sell outside the town, and you need businesses like that. The population base is not big enough to really support 100% tons of businesses. You need something that will draw people from other towns, which is good for everybody. And we've even noticed it since these new ones have opened up. We see a lot more people. They come in, they have 2 or 3 places to stop. That's the allure of Kane now. It's not just like, oh, we're going to drive 30 miles to go to this place and leave. Hey, we're there. We can hit these 3 or 4 places, and I think it'll work good for the town. And through this time frame, we've been able to keep our hospital, which is very nice, and the management of the school's been great. We have a nice facility and a great school system. So it's becoming more of probably a sought after place for people to move, because there are jobs, and people say there's no jobs. There are jobs in the entire area, 30-mile radius, and a lot of people will live here and work in these other jobs. So
it's a great time to be here for sure. So hey, when we were talking earlier, we touched a little bit on some hunting memories. Kane has always been known for hunting and fishing, and there was a time when it was like a huge piece of your life too.
Right. Hunting was really big when I was younger. I mean, it was, it was a holiday. You got off the first day of buck and usually took an illegal absence for the second day, and you took them for doe. You had 3 illegal absences you were allowed, and everybody had them used up by the end of doe season. But the town was booming, just booming every buck season. All the businesses, motels, hotels, and that's changed a little bit for various reasons. But some of my fondest memories were when we hunted. My dad and I would go, and there was always a group of us, and we would hunt down 321. And where we went, it was before a lot of the lease roads and oil and gas roads were in, so we would always have to drive through the creek to get up on the hill. And before you got to the creek, it was nothing but mud and ruts, and every single year we would spend an hour stuck in the mud. I just figured it was a normal part of hunting season. And using come-alongs and getting everything out. All learning experiences. I can run a come-along now and get my truck out if I ever have to. And then once you got through the mud, you had to drive through the creek, which was usually, the water was never any lower than the bottom of your window, and a lot of times it went up over the hood of the car to get through the creek. But you got up on the other side, and we were the only ones up there, and there was, I was young. My dad was, older, and then he had older friends, so we had guys like Lenny Appleknap and Eddie Fragel and his son Eddie, and Steve Short and Walton Alducci, and same group of guys every year. And it was more of an experience. We would have a campfire. You would leave the campfire and go out hunting for a while. Somebody would always tend it, and you'd come back and maybe cooking kibasi, and you'd always come back because back then, you put on bread wrappers over your socks before you put them in your boots, because there was no such thing as waterproof. And there was actually no such thing as warm clothes either. Everything was cold. It was wool, and to get wet, and it would be terrible. And but it was all about the experience and having fun. And those are actually great memories that I can think of, specific days and things that happened and things guys said. And it was a big outing all the time. Same with snowmobiling. We'd go with groups of guys snowmobiling and get out and stop on the trails and start a fire and cook out, and other snowmobilers would come by and we'd feed them, and it was a lot of fun back then.
That's really nice. And I think that just we're in such a setting where you can do those kinds of things.
You can still do those things, and they're nice, and the snowmobiles are way better. Same thing back then. Everybody would foul their plugs. You'd have to take your smart plugs out and get a lighter and try to unfoul your plug. The sleds now are excellent, and it's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And the clothing's warmer, and you got hand warmers.
Yeah.
But it was a real good time.
Those are such great memories, and it makes me so happy to think about the time when you were in elementary school and the neighborhood schools and the neighborhood stores. What great memories that you have that you can look back on now. Yeah.
I'm very happy with the era I grew up in, just to witness it all. Obviously it's sad to see some of the downside, but it's a testament to Kane that they've turned it around, because there's a lot of small towns that haven't and might not ever.
Yeah.
But I really, really think that Kane's on the right path right now, and obviously, they hired you, so they knew what they were doing. So we know we're going in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up today?
No, I'm just very glad you chose me. I think you're doing a great job. I think the town as a whole is doing a great job. There's a great group of young, involved people in this town, and I know it's hard. I was a young guy at one point, and I know it's hard dealing with a lot of the older people to make changes and do things, and I think the group we have in here right now is as good as we've had in decades.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's intergenerational though. Like everyone was working together, and people who stuck it out have led the way. So yeah. This is great, Sam. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm going
to do this. All right, you guys, thanks so much for tuning in. It was really fun to hear about that time period and remember what it was like before technology, and about the neighborhoods, the different smaller stores, hunting season, all of those great things that make childhood in Kane an awesome place to be. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow, and see you then for day 23.